Hey guys, first I want to give a big shout out to my friend Kaden Gardner. If you're new here, make sure to go check out the Kadenverse playlist after this video. And now, I'm excited to announce that this will be a brand new series by Kaden called The Realm. That's enough of me yapping, let's get into the story. Entry 1. I want to preface this by saying I'm not special. I'm not some tough, no-nonsense special forces dude that is built for any and every challenge conceivable. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy hiking. But I also like going home and showering after it's done. I like camping when there's an RV involved. I'm not a survivalist at all either. In fact, the last time I took my kids camping, I had to YouTube how to put a tent up. I'm glad they aren't here with me. I'll be honest, I'm not even sure where here is. We landed in some jungle. Is it a jungle? I don't fucking know. These plants don't make any sense to me. Some of the foliage is blue, some is pink. It's hot as shit for November. It wasn't this hot when the plane left Detroit. I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself. My name is Dan Haddox. I'm a professional marketing consultant. My current contract is at a small tech company based in Houston. See? Average. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's a modest living. I was able to provide for my wife and 2 kids. Until the divorce, that is. That's not important. I don't want to ramble. The important thing I guess would be the tech company, Sparky Spark Incorporated. The name really needed some work, I know. The slogan was worse. What do we do at Sparky Spark Incorporated? We craft the future. Yeah, I was brought in to help fix that. I've only been working with this particular company for a few months actually. They're a fucking mess. I can't make heads or tails of their products. I was actually flown out to Detroit for a demonstration. It went absolutely horribly. We landed in Detroit at 4 a.m. By we, I mean Mr. Ortiz and I. Mr. Ortiz is the head of the Houston office. We would be picked up at the airport and taken to the laboratory. The laboratory was just outside of Detroit, in a dingy basement of some old building. That was where we were introduced to Dr. Devlin and Cecil Steinbach. I'll start with the latter. Cecil Steinbach is the owner and CEO of Sparky Spark. He's young for a CEO. The man looks to be in his mid-30s. He's got a full head of bushy dark hair and a well-trimmed beard. He was wearing cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt when we met him. He also seemed to be in a way too chipper mood. "I'm so happy you guys made it. We've got such a surprise in store for you," he said in an oddly soothing voice. He led us into the lab. Like I said before, it's been built inside of some warehouse basement. When I entered, the first thing I noticed was the massive metallic cylinder that sat in the center of the room. It had a mass of wires and pipes attached to it. I stared at it for a moment. There was an elderly and almost gimpy man working on it. He was way too skinny, was bald, and walked with a limp. That was Dr. Devlin. The man didn't even acknowledge us as we walked in. "As you can see, we're almost ready to test the big one," Cecil spoke softly as we entered. "What exactly does it do?" Cecil smirked. "Here at Sparky Spark, we shape the future. With this, we're going to buy the auto industry out of business." That didn't answer my question, I said with a laugh. Of course. This is Project 42B. It allows for the transfer of energy or matter from one place to another without traveling through the physical space between them. "You mean a teleporter?" I asked. "Precisely. I don't know science very well. I don't know the laws of physics off the top of my head, so it sounded cool. I was skeptical though. I knew it wasn't something that had been done before. If it had, well, the automotive industry would be out of business." I watched as Dr. Devlin walked over to a computer that was plugged into the teleporter and began pressing some buttons. He turned and gave Cecil a thumbs up. "It's ready," Cecil said, his voice optimistic. I could feel it in the air. It was like a slight pressure change. That was when a third unnamed guy walked, a large German shepherd, into the room. He unceremoniously led the dog to the cylinder, where Dr. Devlin opened a door. The dog walked in. The doctor closed the door. then turned back to us. "Did we approve animal testing? Is this dangerous?" asked Mr. Ortiz. Cecil swiped his hand. "It'll be fine. Now, pay close attention. Once Dr. Devlin flips the switch, Rocky will be sent from that tube to this one," he said as he gestured to a second cylinder that was in the corner of the room to my left. I hadn't actually noticed it when I walked in. I honestly didn't like this at all. Don't get me wrong, I'd seen animal testing done before with other contracts, but never something as complex, and well, never anything that was at this level of unknown to me. Dr. Devlin flipped the switch before I had a chance to protest. There was an energy surge, followed by a bright, blinding purple light. Then, as suddenly as it started, it was over. I turned my head to the other cylinder, where Dr. Devlin limped his gimpy ass over in a hurry, reaching for the handle and yanking the door open. The first thing that hit me was the smell, like vomit and burnt flesh. I could see inside the cylinder as a pink gelatinous-like liquid sizzled. I couldn't contain it. I heaved, spilling the contents of my stomach everywhere onto the floor. Mr. Ortiz had his hands on his hips. "Cecil, can I talk to you for a second?" I could hear the anger radiating in his voice. I didn't blame him at all. This was ridiculous. They killed that poor dog. Cecil and Ortiz walked out of the basement. I watched as Devlin kneeled down next to the pink gelatinous stew. He took a sample. No, this isn't right," he whispered to himself sharply. "No shit, you killed that dog," I barked. He ignored my outburst as he held the vial of pink gel up and examined it. "It must have failed in its reconstruction of the matter," he said almost robotically. I was at a loss for words. I could hear Mr. Ortiz shouting at the CEO in the hallway behind me, something about losing their financial backing if they didn't get results. Cecil assured Ortiz that it was just a setback. This made me anxious. I'd thought Cecil was the one in charge. Was I wrong? Mr. Ortiz walked back into the room. Cecil was right behind him. "Mr. Haddox, we apologize for the inconvenience this trip may have caused you. Cecil and Dr. Devlin are going to do a little more research, and we will reconvene next month to try and run a safer test." "Will this include any animal abuse?" I asked. No. There will be no more live subjects. We will head to the Houston office in the morning and try to find another production push in the meantime." That honestly sounded good to me. I just wanted to be out of there. I nodded, but that was when Dr. Devlin spoke up. "Mr. Ortiz, would you and your associate like to take Project 42C back to the Houston office for us? Dr. Taggart would like to switch out a few chips." "Project 42C?" asked Ortiz. Dr. Devlin produced a small black robotic sphere from one of his pockets. "It's supposed to be like a remote for 42B, he said with a toothy grin. "Will this get past customs?" asked Ortiz. "It's just an electronic device. It's not a bomb, although I'd advise against pressing any buttons while on the flight." Ortiz rolled his eyes as he took the sphere and placed it into his computer bag. And then with that, we left. The ride to the airport was silent. I can remember thinking about that poor dog the whole way there. They had killed it, and no one had batted an eye. Mr. Ortiz eyed me a few times. It was unsettling. I'd signed an NDA before coming along. Legally, I can't talk about it. Although given my current circumstances, I'm not sure it matters anymore. I didn't make much eye contact with Mr. Ortiz as we went through customs. We sat together on the crowded plane. But I again didn't really speak. All I could think about was that stupid dog being turned into jello. I thought about my NDA. What would violating it cost me? We'd been airborne for maybe around 30 minutes when things got weird. I hadn't said a word. I was still lost in thought. Then came the turbulence. The plane jerked and bounced several times. I could hear some of the crowd gasp. There was a few startled yelps. The light above me that said to fasten seatbelts dinged on. I held my breath. I'm not a big fan of flying to begin with. Mr. Ortiz was dozed off next to me. I turned and looked at him too. I can remember thinking that he was oddly relaxed. I turned and looked at the woman sitting to my right. She was an older woman, maybe her late 60s. I never got her name. She'd fastened her seatbelt tight. This is your captain speaking. It seems we're going to be going through a few rough spots, so if you'll please fasten your seatbelts. I didn't hear the rest of his speech as I nudged Ortiz. He shook himself awake and looked at me. I pointed at the fasten seatbelt sign. He grunted under his breath and fastened his seatbelt. Now might be a good time to point out, we weren't flying fancy. We were flying some low-down piece of shit airline. I think Spirit? Maybe? The plane was yellow, or what's left of it is. Ortiz and I had our backpacks as carry-ons, and he had his in his lap for whatever reason. I think he'd been using it as a pillow. We hit a bit more turbulence, this one more violent. Everything jerked around all at once. It kinda hurt. Shit, I remember Ortiz barking. I think that one gave me whiplash, a voice said from behind us. Ortiz unzipped his back and reached in. He started to pull a tablet out. Then it happened. Another violent jerk. Ortiz's backpack went up into the air. The world seemed to slow down for a second. He reached out to grab it, but it landed in the aisle. Screams reverberated throughout the plane. Ortiz reached for his back from over the armrest on his seat. His fingers grazed it when the plane suddenly lost power. It dropped like a sack of rocks. The backpack was yanked off the floor by an unseen force. It hit the ceiling of the plane with a smack. Everyone was screaming now as the plane just fell out of the sky. My blood pressure jumped. I know it did. I felt dizzy. I thought in that moment that we were going to die. I was going to die, and it was because Sparky Spark decided to fly Spirit. Then, suddenly, the plane rocketed forward. I was pushed down hard into my seat as the engines all roared to life at once. We weren't going down. Not yet anyway. I remember the relief washing over me. This is your captain speaking. It seems we're having some engine malfunctions. We're going to be making an emergency landing at... He was cut off by a bright purple flash, one that came from a spherical device that was rolling out from Ortiz's backpack. The light was blinding. The plane powered down again. Screams called out. The old lady sitting next to me grabbed onto my arm. I can remember glancing her direction, finding myself looking straight out of the window of the plane, where the afternoon sky was consumed by a strange purplish swirling haze. I didn't really have the time to dwell on it, as we were again rapidly descending. But looking at it now, it was like we were falling through a glowing neon purple cloud. The rest of the plane crash is a mystery to me. Maybe I passed out from fear. I don't know. I woke up to a man cutting my seatbelt off. I was still inside the plane, sort of. There was a massive hole to my right. The chair that had been next to me had been ripped out. I could see foliage and plant life. We'd landed in some dense vegetation. I got a good look at the man cutting me out. He looked former military, clean cut, short beard. He cut my belt with a pocket knife, then yanked me out of my chair. "Come on, buddy, up and at 'em," he said as he threw my arm over his shoulder and walked me into the aisle. There wasn't much left of the back of the plane, maybe 5 rows behind us. Then there was a flattened vegetation for a few hundred feet. Must have been our landing zone. The man who had cut me out walked me over to several of the survivors. There were maybe 20 of us, which was honestly surprising. Mr. Ortiz came and helped him stabilize me. We'd all kind of huddled just outside of the wreckage. Almost half of us were injured in some way. I looked out into the distance. I could see bits and pieces of the plane scattered about behind us. "What happened?" I asked. "Plane crashed," said Ortiz. I looked at the man who helped sit me down. I got a good look at the surrounding people. There was a blonde woman that was trying to provide first aid to a man whose leg was completely mangled. I mean, this thing had bits of bone sticking out. In his defense though, he handled it like a trooper. I wanted to puke. I could see a tall black man in a pilot's uniform counting the survivors. The military-looking guy said something to him. He nodded. From sitting here so far, I've learned that he's Captain Brooks. The military-looking guy was our air marshal. He goes by Buck. We're trying to treat our wounded, while Brooks and Buck tinker with trying to get help. But I know I'm not the only one who's noticed that the trees don't look right, that it's way too hot. And I know I'm not the only one who's noticed that there are 2 moons in the sky. That's why I actually got into my carry-on and started writing this in my journal. We're not in Kansas anymore, and I don't like this at all. Entry 2. What kind of god would create a place like this? Or was it the devil? Did I die and end up in limbo? We've been here for 2 days. 2 fucking days, and I'm already considering offing myself. Let me start. We gathered our bearings a little bit. The blonde chick, Dara, actually turned out to be a paramedic, which was extremely lucky for most of those with serious injuries. But at the same time, we had to deal with the heat. No signal, no water or food aside from the plane's snacks. Which, none of that was important yet. We didn't know for sure we were about to have to go into survival mode. Well, I kinda guessed based on the 2 fucking moons that were dangling overhead. One of them is about half the size of the other. It glows a yellow color while the other is a scarlet pinkish. I stood there and stared at them for a good 5 minutes, staring and listening to the jungle cadence all around us. It was alive with all kinds of creatures. That ain't good, a voice said softly from my right. I turned and saw Buck standing there, staring with me. Where are we? I asked. Buck sighed. I wish I knew. Something tells me we ain't between Houston and Detroit though. I thought for a moment. Then I turned to where Mr. Ortiz was sitting. He was staring at the sphere. Then it hit me. I just about stomped up to him. What happened? I asked. Ortiz ignored me. He only fidgeted with the device some more. Mr. Ortiz? I said a little louder. He eyed me from behind it. I wish I was more of a science type, he said. Do you think? I started. He glared at me. He knew what I was going to ask. He glared for a moment before he took a deep solemn breath. I do. Can we reverse it? I asked. I don't know. I don't know what caused this thing to activate in the first place. Like I said, I'm not the science type. I was about to open my mouth to speak when the ground rumbled. It was then that I noticed the jungle was dead fucking silent. I wasn't the only one who'd noticed this either. My eyes shot over to Buck, who was scanning the tree line to our left. Dara and another guy stood next to him. What was that? She asked. I don't know, he replied. The ground rumbled again. I couldn't see deep into the foliage. It was maybe 10 meters to either side of us. It was also around the height of a 2 to 3 story building. Look, I'm not an outdoorsy type of guy, alright? But I know that when the jungle is silent, there's typically a predator around. Then came the roar. The god-awful roar, deep and thunderous. It accompanied massive footfalls that came closer and closer to the edge of the clearing. Everyone, get back into the plane, Buck shouted as he turned to run. He grabbed Dara by her wrist and yanked her along. I took off as well, springing for the broken visage of the aircraft. I was right behind Mr. Ortiz. I turned my head right as the creature erupted from the tree line. My heart jumped into my throat. I'm pretty sure I peed a little. I watched in horror as a fucking T-Rex stomped out of the jungle, its massive foot coming down onto the lower body of the man with the mangled leg. He roared in pain, but his roar was cut off by the thing's jaws as they clamped down onto his upper half. Mr. Ortiz yanked me into the plane. I watched as the T-Rex pulled the man's torso from the rest of his body. Blood and gore covered the green scaly skin. The survivors screamed and cried from around me. The T-Rex greedily swallowed his top half. Then its eyes locked onto us. Buck was at the opening. He'd pulled his service pistol out and had it aimed. The creature snarled as it glared at us. Shoot it! Ortiz barked. It'll just piss him off. Buck barked back. He's already pissed off, Dara shouted. It was then that the captain stepped forward with a fucking flare gun. The creature eyed him suspiciously as he aimed the orange pistol and fired. A red, streaking flare hit the dinosaur right in its snout. The creature bellowed in pain as the flare charred and cooked its skin. The beast slammed its head onto the floor as it tried to put the flare out, screeching and whimpering while it did so. Then came the second T-Rex from the brush. Then the third. Both of these ones more than twice the size of their juvenile counterpart. "Oh shit!" I could hear a heavier set man cry from my left. I turned to Mr. Ortiz, who was already retreating further into the aircraft. I followed suit. I could hear Buck firing his pistol behind us. Then something rammed the plane. Rammed it hard enough to knock almost everyone off their feet. Mr. Ortiz and I landed right next to the opening where he and I had been sitting before the crash. I looked down at my feet. Buck was scrambling backward as one of the bigger dinosaurs had its head and shoulders inside the plane, its jaws snipping and snapping after him. There were more screams and cries. The captain was doing his best to load another flare. Mr. Ortiz was scrambling to his feet. He'd fumbled the device from his back and started frantically pressing every button he could. I think I could hear him crying. Then came the snapping jaws, right through the opening. Mr. Ortiz was next to me, and then he wasn't. I could feel warm liquid oozing down my face. He didn't even get the chance to scream. I barely had a chance to scramble backward as the smaller T-Rex's head came chomping through the hole. I could hear the captain's flare gun go off behind me. Another loud screech, but the plane only rattled. I was too focused on the creature quite literally nipping at my heels. It was the heavier set man, Phil, who yanked me to my feet. The creature powered almost half of its body into the plane. We scrambled up what was left of the aisle, the creature now between ourselves and Buck, Dara, a few survivors, and the captain. The smaller dinosaur's eyes were locked onto us. It bellowed. Then came another impact from the same side. The other big one threw its body into the side of the plane. This caused us to lose our balance again as the plane cabin rolled with the juvenile T-Rex still inside it. Bodies flew around. I think it bounced 2 or 3 times off a few different seats before everything came to a rest. The cabin was upside down. I found myself staring right out the back half of the plane, where one of the survivors was struggling to her feet and looking straight up at something. The dinosaur towered over her. Its head was bigger than she was. She screamed once before the jaws came down. It was like watching a toddler eat a dinosaur-shaped chicken nugget. I'm sure there's some irony in there somewhere. My eyes went large as I heard the low groan behind me. I turned to see the juvenile T-Rex, its eyes on me, but its head bent almost 180 degrees backward as it had been rolled along with us. That was when someone pulled me to my feet. It was Buck, again. "Let's go," he shouted as he yanked me through another hole that I hadn't seen before. I was still a little hazy, but I knew that we needed to run for our lives. Buck was fast, faster than he ought to have been. I didn't question it though. I just kept running. I could hear screams behind us, the dinosaurs roaring, flesh being ripped and torn. We fought our way through the thick jungle, just making a beeline for wherever we could. I don't think I've ever ran that hard or that far. We eventually found ourselves at a river. I fell to my knees and threw my guts up. My whole body hurt like hell. Buck knelt down next to me. "You alright, man?" he asked. I grunted. There was movement in the bushes to our left. Phil stumbled out alongside the captain and Dara. A few other survivors came out of the brush along the river as well. Buck and Captain Brooks got everyone together. All in all, up to that point, I counted maybe 10 of us. I don't quite have everyone's names yet. Not that it matters for all of them anyway now. There was myself, Buck, Captain Brooks, Dara, Phil. Those are the ones I've mentioned so far. Then there was Belle. She's a younger girl. I think one of the flight attendants. Then there was Mac. He looks like a cop, maybe a firefighter. Then there was Suit. I only call him Suit because he was dressed eerily similar to Mr. Ortiz. That, and as soon as we got to the beach, he turned around, his cheeks red and his eyes blazing with fury. I'm going to sue the airline. I'm going to sue you." He pointed at the captain. "By the time my lawyers are done with you, you'll be lucky to be able to rent an apartment in Detroit. Do you understand me?" "Sir, you flew spirit. You really expect us to believe you can afford a lawyer?" Mac replied with a shit-eating grin on his face. "Why, you son of a— Enough," Captain Brooks ordered. All eyes were on him now. Buck then stepped forward. "I don't know if you all have noticed, unless you booked a ticket to Jurassic fucking Park, but we were just attacked by actual living breathing dinosaurs. We're clearly up shit's creek without a paddle. I don't think anyone's going to be suing anyone anytime soon. He looked us all over. We are now in a survival situation in an area we know nothing about. Fighting isn't going to get us anywhere. His eyes went to Soot. I wouldn't stand too close to that water. I looked at Soot. He was standing with his hands on his hips, his back to the riverbank. He scowled at Buck, then turned and looked at the river. The water was mud green and flowing pretty hard. Buck took a deep breath and eyed Captain Brooks. Captain Brooks nodded. Do any of you have any survival experience? Military? Camping? Shit like that? Buck asked. Mac raised his hand. I was a ranger. No shit, asked Buck. Yes, sir. You ex-military? Marines, actually, said Buck. Oh, fuck you then, said Mac. Buck scoffed and smirked. Anyone else? I was a Boy Scout when I was young, said Phil. Buck smiled, then looked at Belle. She had her hand up as well. You? He asked. Army Reserve. Well, it's something. His eyes landed on me. What about you? I chuckled softly. I went camping in an RV once. Buck nodded. I was expecting him to be judgy about it, but he wasn't. He looked like he was thinking. He turned to Suits and the other two guys who were sitting down and staring at something across the water. Guys? One of them said. I looked up to see what he was staring at. In the trees across from us, there was a big-ass bird. When I say big-ass bird, I mean a big-ass bird. The thing was easily 10 feet tall. It was clearly flightless, like an ostrich, but it was beefier. Its beak was massive and grayish in color. It was covered in white feathers. It squawked as it examined us. Is that a fucking terror bird? Asked Mac. What's a terror bird? Asked Belle. A massive carnivorous bird from the Cenozoic era, Phil said as he squatted next to the riverbank and stared at it. I looked at Phil. You like dinosaurs? I asked. I'm an archaeologist. Of course I do. But this, terror birds and tyrannosaurs were millions of years apart. On Earth maybe, said Buck. The terror bird cocked its head at us, almost like it was studying us, as if we were peculiar intruders to its habitat, which we were. It would also have to cross an actual river to get to us. I wasn't tripping. Not yet, at least. What do we do? Asked one of the seated guys. The bird watched us for a second before turning its massive body and walking back towards the brush. That's when we all saw the saddle on its back. A full-on leather saddle, straps and all. I could hear Buck's breath hitch. A saddle meant people. A saddle like that meant intelligent people. A settlement could mean civilization, close by too. That was enough for Buck. He looked around, his eyes landing on the captain who seemed to read his mind. Mac did too. Captain Brooks pulled the flare gun and loaded it again. Wait, Mac said. All eyes were on him now. What if they're not friendly? He asked. Not friendly? The fuck you mean not friendly? Asked Captain Brooks. I could see Buck exhale. This place clearly isn't Earth. We don't know. They could be 8 feet tall in blue for all we know. How about 6 feet tall in Asian? Asked Belle as she looked down our riverbank. We all turned to see two men riding two of those birds in our direction. They looked well-built, muscular and covered in animal furs and leathery armor. If I could compare them to anyone from history, it would have to be the Mongols. They came to a stop a few paces from us. Suits stepped forward. Oh, thank God. Thank you, he said as he waved his hands at them. The lead rider looked up and down and smiled. He laughed as he said something in a language I didn't understand. The other rider laughed as well. That was when I noticed the massive lances on their backs, the oversized swords on their hips. English! Do you speak English? Can you take us home? You take home, big reward. Suits tried negotiating. The lead rider answered. No one could understand them. We all looked at each other curiously for a moment. The lead rider sighed. Then he announced something to all of us that we didn't understand. Sir? Asked Suits. That was enough of that. The lead rider waved his hand and something hissed out of the woods. Suits stood there for a moment, grabbing at the arrow lodged in his throat. He crumpled to the ground. "No!" shouted Buck as more arrows came flying out from the jungle. The two men who were seated didn't make it. They were hit first. There wasn't much we could do. Even with Buck's 9mm, we found ourselves cornered on a beach as some 20 archers emerged around us. The lead terrorbird rider shouting commands at us that we didn't understand the whole way. We surrendered. They searched us and then tied us up and made us walk behind their massive birds. Well, they did this with the men. Dara and Belle got to ride in a cage. I guess chivalry was alive out here. We were led to a tent city. The tents were made from red linens, and there were flags adorned above everyone. Flags with an archer riding atop a terrorbird. The camp itself was massive. There had to be thousands in this horde. The birds had free roam of the place too, picking and plucking at the ground like chickens. We were led into a larger camp near the center of camp, still bound by thick ropes around our wrists. Belle and Dara were led inside as well. The ones who captured us roughly threw us onto the tent floor. We were sat down in front of a heavier set man who rested in his chair. It was hot and sticky in there. It smelled all kinds of bad. The man looked us up and down. Then he asked us a question in a very calm voice. We all looked at each other. No one knew how to respond, or if we even should respond. As if not responding was the answer he was looking for. He simply nodded his head and looked at one of the riders who had escorted us in. He barked an order, then turned and looked at us as the man ran off. He exhaled, then said something that only he seemed to find funny. A few moments later, the rider came in followed by a horde of women bearing cups. Full cups. I thought it was water. I was ready to greedily drink it, and I did. And it was not water at all. It tasted bitter and sour. My face puckered as I tried to spit it out, but arms suddenly wrapped around my head. Someone was suddenly holding my nose as someone else forced the liquid down my throat. God, it burned going down. Burned worse than whiskey. I swallowed like a good little whore. Then they threw me to the tent floor, which I then noticed was made from some kind of animal skin. I wanted to gag that mystery juice up, but my entire body was burning. My head was aching. I could hear the groans of everyone next to me. Everything was becoming hazy again. Then I slipped into blackness. I awoke to a splash of cold water that sent shockwaves through my system. I inhaled as I scrambled back, only to be caught by my binding. "Good morning, little rat," a voice said from ahead of me. I looked up at the heavy man as he knelt down in front of me. I guess my face gave away my surprise. "Yes, you can understand me now. Good." What was in that drink?" I asked. He sighed and motioned his hand. My stomach was suddenly impacted by a club. I groaned in pain as I buckled forward. "I didn't tell you that you could speak. Do it again and I'll have your balls cut off and fed to the chickens." My eyes widened. I was pulled to my feet. I looked around the room at everyone. No one looked happy to be there. "Okay, now that we all have an understanding of one another, I am Slave Master Arban. You now have the privilege of being enslaved by the chicken god and his horde. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not eat without permission. You will not sleep without permission. You will not die without permission. Your whole existence revolves around your ability to serve. Failure to do so will result in you being fed to the chickens." "I, Slave Master Arban?" a voice called out from the tent entrance. The slave master turned and looked at him. It was a teenage girl. "The chicken god wishes to see the new slaves." "Now?" asked Arban. "Yes, now." Arban turned back to us, all dramatic-like. "It seems the Khan would like a demonstration." We were marched through camp. It really stuck out to me just how many women and children were running around. It also annoyed me the number of little boys that pointed and laughed at us. We were marched into another massive tent in the center of the camp. This one looked like a full-on house almost, with an entryway that led into an even wider room, where the slave master lined us up. A man stood at a table with several other men. He was young, He had dark hair that was shaved on the sides, while the hair on the top was tied back into a ponytail. He had dark leathery armor on. He instructed his generals well. His eyes shot to us when we entered. He smiled. "Welcome," he said with his arms out wide. "Kneel before the chicken god," Arbon said as he kicked Belle's legs out from under her. "Arbon!" the chicken god bellowed as he stepped over and pulled Belle to her feet. "Yes, my lord." "What have I told you about beating the slaves?" "It makes them harder to sell?" asked Arbon. The man helped Belle to her feet, grunting under his breath as he did so. I could see Buck glaring at him out of the corner of my eye. "Well, yes, but also, do you think Remus treats their slaves with such barbarism?" "They do make them fight to the death in the arena, my liege." The chicken god looked a little caught off guard by that statement. "They don't beat them beforehand, and those slaves are volunteers," he said as he looked us over. He thought for a few moments. My, some of these men look strong. Take this one, and this one." He pointed at Mac, Buck, and Captain Brooks. "Have them cleaned and placed front and center for tomorrow's auction. What about the rest? If I can convince the Remulan Council to buy the 3 at full price, I'll throw in the rest for a discount," he said as he turned and started walking back towards his table. He then stopped and looked at myself and Phil. "Or maybe these ones can put on a show." He thought about the idea for a moment. "Yes, let them face Dava in the pit." "Dava?" I asked. I was very quickly whipped in the back. It stung like hell. I dropped to my hands and knees. "Apologies, my liege," Arbon said as he knelt down. The chicken god ignored him as he knelt down in front of me. "Dava is one of my chickens, a quite ferocious one as well. Don't worry, my friend, he doesn't play with his food much." I looked the chicken god in his eyes. There was a dissociation in them, like he was here, but not actually here. The man had lost all his marbles ages ago. He smiled madly at me, then got to his feet and clapped his hands. We were all escorted to our tent, which was full of cages. We weren't the only slaves in there. There were quite a few actually. The males and females were put in 2 different cages. There were lots of female slaves, maybe 10 or 12, while there were only 2 other male slaves. One a lanky, bearded man, the other a man with long muddy hair who sat in the corner and glared at us as we filed in. The guards left us some type of slop in some bowls to eat and pretty much just left us to our own devices. They even gave us our stuff back. Well, most of it. They didn't give Buck back his pistol or the captain his flare gun. I guess they're not totally dumb, but they did give me my bag, which ain't shit but clothes, a laptop, which is gone, and my journal. No one has said much. I'm pretty sure I heard Belle crying earlier. Dara tried comforting her. Buck and Captain Brooks are talking escape plans. Mac is sitting with myself and Phil. "You're into dinosaurs, huh?" he asked Phil. Phil laughed softly. "You are too, I suppose. Picked out that terror bird from across the river." Mac smirked. "Yeah, grew up watching Jurassic Park. Got into all the documentaries on the Discovery Channel." "You said you were a ranger?" asked Phil. "I was." "What do you do now?" he asked. "I'm a contractor, of sorts." "Sounds boring," I said. I turned to Mac. Mac was staring at me with a smirk. "Yeah, well, it sounds better than mercenary, I guess." "Oh, that kind of contractor," I said. "What were you doing in Detroit?" asked Buck as he started picking up on the conversation. "Would you believe me if I said I was on vacation?" asked Mac. "Hell no," said Buck. "Fair enough. Well, seeing as how we're probably not going to get out of this, I guess it doesn't matter. I was supposed to be following you and Mr. Ortiz to Sparky Spark's Houston office." My eyes widened. "Why?" I asked. Mac shrugged. "I don't know. I don't ask questions. I just kill who I'm told." "You were going to kill us?" I asked. "Well, not you. But hey, ain't something we gotta worry about now, is it?" Yes, I was worried." I very calmly stood up and walked across the cell. I sat down on the other side, maybe 10 feet from the man with the muddy hair. I looked at him. His blue eyes shot up to me. He had a snarl on his face. I scooted over some more. That's where I am right now, writing everything in this stupid journal. Good Lord, I want to go home. I want to hold my kids. I want to sleep in a bed. I want to crack open a bottle of tequila and go to town. Actually, no. I'm like 10 months sober. Can't be doing that. You know what? No, I can think about booze. I'm gonna have to fight what I assume to be a massive angry bird tomorrow. Good Lord, I'm probably gonna die. Entry 3. Well, this shit just keeps getting weirder. We were woken up by literal horns as the sun crested the horizon. The guards came in and marched Buck, Mac, and Brooks out. We waited for maybe 30 minutes before they came and got the rest of us. We were marched through camp again. It was livelier than it had been the day before. People were everywhere. We were taken just outside the camp, where there was a significant crowd gathered around what looked to me like a dried-out pond. That was when I noticed that the chicken god was sitting at a small wooden table across from a man who was dressed in a white toga. The man was flanked on either side by men who were dressed like Greek soldiers? Were they Greek? Hoplites maybe? I think that's the word. That's what they looked like. Straight out of Clash of the Titans. They were armed with spears and circular shields. I could hear the chicken god speak as we were brought forth. As you can see, Achaeus, our stock is top-notch, he said. As we were marched past them, I could see Buck, Mac, and Brooks standing naked in front of this Achaeus. Achaeus was an old man. He looked to be in his 60s. He had a thick beard and frizzled gray hair. He stood from his chair and examined the men closely. Good stock indeed. Where did you come across these ones? He asked. The jungles of Lillian. No wonder. If these specimens made it to adulthood in those conditions. The chicken god shrugged almost nonchalantly. The old man bent down and examined all of their genitals. And they'll make for fine breeders too. This one definitely, he said, gesturing to Brooks. I could see Buck eye Brooks. Brooks's eyes went wide as he subtly shrugged. We were suddenly standing at the edge of the dried-out pond. Inside, I could see that it had been fortified into a pit. The walls had been reinforced with wood. The ground was sandy. There was a cage sitting at the far end. A cage that was covered by a tarp. Bring in some new slaves. Immediately sell them or feed them to the chicken, Arban complained as he stepped in front of me. He pressed his lips together as he undid my restraints. There was a crowd gathered around the pit now. Arban smiled at me. Step forward, he said. I didn't get the chance to say no as 2 guards shoved me to step forward. I was now at the edge of the pit. I could hear the terror bird begin to shake and rattle in its cage. Dava is hungry, the chicken god proclaimed as he clapped. Achaeus sat there calmly. He took a sip from a beverage. Phil was shoved up next to me. I turned to him. He had fear in his eyes. I'd be lying if I didn't say I was scared too. I looked down into the pit. It was maybe 30 yards across. The cage was rattling hard on the other end. That was when I was kicked in the back. I fell flat on my face in the dirt. It was maybe a 10-foot drop. I rolled just in time to see Phil land right next to me. I struggled in getting to my feet. Then came Muddy Hair. The man seemed to land on his feet. He glared up at the chicken god, who seemed to smile at him widely. The chicken god stood up. The crowd around us was massive. I felt like a chihuahua in Mike Vick's house, except a chihuahua is 1,000 times meaner than I am. I looked up at Arban, who cruelly tossed 2 swords down into the pit with us. Brothers and sisters of the horde, in this pit, we have 2 slaves and a heretic. Their blood shall flow. It shall satiate the endless thirst of the mightiest of the flock. Brothers and sisters, are you ready to feed Dava? 2 burly men heaved on some ropes. I could see the tarp rising with the front of the cage. Muddy Hair reached down and grabbed the sword. He then eyed me before getting into a battle stance. My eyes were on the cage, which was now shaking violently as the creature inside squawked and begged to be released. I swallowed hard. Grab the sword, Buck's voice called out. I didn't have time. The creature came flying out like a bat out of hell. its massive beak covered in dried blood and leading the way. It charged right at Muddy Hair, who dove to one side. It kept coming straight at me. I panicked and leapt to one side. Then came the screams. I just turned in time to see its sharpened talons tearing into Phil's stomach. The crowd cheered as he struggled. His intestines were out in moments as the beak came down on his head. Muddy Hair seized his opportunity and leapt on the beast's back, sinking his sword deep into it. Its blood went everywhere, but it spun its massive beak around and chomped down on his arm before flinging him into a wall. The bird then yanked the sword out. I laid on my belly, staring in awe for a moment. How was this thing still alive? I got to my feet. Muddy Hair was on the ground next to the wall. His forearm was bleeding. I eyed the sword to my left. Then I eyed Phil, whose lifeless corpse was sprawled out across the ground next to the table. The creature's attention was on Muddy Hair. He was about to strike. I practically jumped at the sword, but my hands fucking fumbled it for a split second. That was all the time it needed to turn its attention to me. Its cold, unfeeling gaze locked onto me. I swallowed. The creature came charging forward, its mouth open and hungry. I jumped to one side at the last moment. Then the bitch ran headfirst into the wall, hard. The terror bird stumbled backward, dazed and drunk like my creepy Uncle Rick on Valentine's Day. This was my chance. My eyes found the sword again. I bent down and grabbed it and went to work. I hacked at the terror bird's neck. Its blood sprayed me in the face and covered the sand. I roared as I hacked again and again. The bird fell. The crowd went dead silent. I was still hacking and screaming. Fuck this bird. I fucking hated this bird. I kept going until my arms and legs ached, and I just fell to my knees sobbing. I didn't even notice the crowd was dead silent at that point. Not until I heard someone clear their throat. I turned to see the chicken god. He was in literal tears. His archers had their bows aimed at me from all angles. You killed Dava, he said between sniffles. I got to my feet. There's a weird feeling knowing that you're about to die. I'd always imagined that I would go out kicking, crying and screaming like a coward. But no, I felt calm in that moment. Eerily calm. Maybe it was hate. Hate for this man standing above me. Hate for Spirit Airlines. And above all, hate for Sparky Spark. I could feel the grip on my sword tighten. I looked at Arban, then the chicken god. Fuck your bird, I growled. Mind your tongue, slave, Arban boomed as he pulled a whip from his belt and raised it. Stop, Achaeus announced as he stood up. Arban turned to him, then the chicken god. Achaeus looked at the chicken god. I'll buy him, double the usual price. The chicken god seemed confused at this. Why? He's scrawny. He's tiny. Do you know how much money I can make off of him? He looked at me. Slave, what is your name? Dan Harrox? Dan Harrox, slayer of chickens. This will sell at the arena. And if not, he will die horribly. You got lucky, Arban called out. All combat is luck, slave master. Perhaps if you faced any real combat, you yourself would understand that. This made the chicken god laugh. Arban's face went pink with rage. You want me to sell you the man who killed my Dava? Asked the chicken god as he wiped tears away. I do, said Achaeus. You have balls, my friend. Triple the price. You can have the heretic too. Achaeus looked down into the pit at Muddy Hair. You would sell me your brother? The horde can't have two chicken gods. Fair enough. We were taken from the pit and loaded into cages on wheels, which, to my relief, were pulled by horses. Muddy Hair was given some medical treatment. The chicken god really did sell us all. We've been on some old dirt road for maybe a week now. It's still hot as hell. This whole world is strange so far. We exited the jungles yesterday. Now we're in some mountain pass. I'm not sure if things are exactly looking up for us on the account of us being slaves and all. Achaeus actually gives us water though, so there's that. I can see a city up ahead. It's nestled between the mountains and the ocean. Looks exactly like something you'd expect from a sword and sandal epic to look. White, marble-looking buildings and all. It would almost be beautiful, if not for the fact that I'm gonna be a battle slave and probably die a terrible death at the hands of some primeval monstrosity. I'd say I gotta stay optimistic. But I'm a fucking marketing consultant, not a chicken slayer.